Welcome to this episode of Grassroots Advocacy. During our previous episode, we talked about advocating for our profession in terms of working with people who were potential candidates to enter the profession. In this episode, we're going to focus on how we interact and communicate and advocate with our peers, with our fellow caregivers, with the folks who help us to deliver exceptional care on a daily basis. So, one of the things that occurs to me is that sometimes we folks in long-term care don't really need to go to the gym. And that is because if you look at this graphic, you'll see my point. So sometimes we get a lot of exercise, jumping to conclusions, flying off the handle, running down the boss, dodging responsibility. That's not my hall assignment. Climbing the ladder, pulling the strings, stretching the truth. Well, I did it, but, and bending the rules and then pushing our luck. So I mentioned this to you and I shared this meme with you because it could sometimes describe the way we interact with our fellow nursing assistants, with our peers, with the folks that help us to deliver great care. And it's what I really wanted to touch base on today. And the first thing that I wanted to ask you to consider is this. It's really very helpful for you, before you provide constructive feedback to your peers, it's really important for you to take a moment to ask yourself, what is my motivation? Why do I want to do this? Do I want to do this because I want to help them be the best caregiver they can be? Or do I do this because I want to poke them in the gut? It's important to think about why we want to do it. And I would encourage you to always try to approach providing constructive feedback from a standpoint of, I want to help that person be the best CNA, the best nursing assistant, the best caregiver they can possibly be, because the men and women we care for deserve it. So I wanted to ask you to think about this 5-step process for providing constructive feedback. So the first thing is the timing, and making sure that the timing is right. I remember when I was a younger person, I worked with a leader, and one of the best pieces of advice he ever gave me, he said, Jeff, remember this very simple thing. Praise in public and counsel in private. It's really important for us to think about that from the standpoint that we love having people tell us we're doing a great job. We also can become very easily offended and defensive when someone tells us we're not doing a good job, especially in a public setting. So I wanted to encourage you to think about, number one, what's my timing? The next thing is I wanted to encourage you to think about checking yourself. And what do you really mean? What are you trying to get at with this feedback? Is it really about helping them to be their best? Or is it about something that you're dealing with? There's this old saying that misery loves company. Well, this providing constructive feedback is not about trying to help people to feel miserable like you. It's about building them up and really creating the best opportunity for them to be who they can be. The next thing is, step number 3 is to think about how we can create a straw man. So how you could approach that is, instead of saying, Jeff, you did that wrong, you might say, hey, Jeff, one time when I was working with this other nursing assistant, I noticed that they pulled the resident down the hallway in their wheelchair also. And that concerned me. It concerned me because of safety. It concerned me because of dignity. And it concerned me because it just doesn't fit with our organization's culture and the way we do things. So it's really important for us to make sure that when we're assisting residents with transfer in their wheelchair, that we push them and that we're mindful of safety considerations and that we're doing everything we can to help them have the best experience that they can have. Then the next thing I'd like to ask you to think about is focusing on the action and not the person. And it's really super important for us to think about this. It's very easy for folks to say, you did that wrong. And that finger wagging and that you did that wrong, it creates in all of us this very natural behavior called the fight or flight response. And so when you're providing constructive feedback, it's really very important for you to think about how to avoid triggering that fight or flight response, because you don't want them to go postal and you don't want them to run away so that they can't hear what you have to say. So I encourage you to think about that and incorporate that into how you plan to communicate. The final thing that I'd like to ask you to think about is sharing the feedback when you need to share it. Not everything that happens requires you to provide constructive feedback to your peers. For example, sometimes what you observe might be an isolated instance. So let's say, for the sake of discussion, I'm scooting down the hall and I'm headed into room number 107 and I've got my arms full and I just wheel right around the corner and go right through the room. Well, as my peer, as my fellow professional, you might want to come and say, hey, Jeff, you've got to remember to knock every time you enter. Or you might approach it this way. You might say, I don't think Jeff's ever done that before. Maybe I need to pay attention to see if this is something that's happening repeatedly. So you watch me. And let's say that you notice that I don't do that again. The next time I go into room number 107, I knock and I announce myself and I ask for permission to enter and I just do it. I do a wonderful job. Well, in that particular instance, there's really no need to provide me constructive feedback because I know how to do it right. Now, let's say on the other hand, that you observe and for the next 3 or 4 times you watch me, you notice me just go right on in there, just barge right in. Then you might say, hey, Jeff, I know you're going to be going on break here in a few minutes. When you go on break, let me know and I'll go with you and we can grab a pop. And then you can go and you can sit down and you can have a conversation with me. And you can say, Jeff, it's really, really super important that we respect the privacy and the dignity of the folks who live and receive care here. And one of the ways that we do that physically and behaviorally is by making sure that we knock on the door, we announce ourselves, and we ask permission to enter. That's part of our organization's policies and procedures, and it's also in compliance with the federal and state regulations. I know you can do it because you've been successful in the past, and I just want to encourage you to do it so that you'll continue to be successful in the future. So I want to encourage you to think about that. I want to, before I share with you our quote for the day, I want to encourage you to think about this. As an advocate, you have the opportunity to create a higher aspiration, a higher goal, a higher desire. You have the opportunity to encourage and promote excellence. And so when you're providing constructive feedback, I encourage you to think about, how do I set that bar? It could be, Jeff, you are this close to being the best nursing assistant I've ever worked with. Once we get over that attitude, you're going to be a rock star. Or it might be, Jeff, I've noticed that you are not your pleasant and wonderful self. And I'm sure you'd agree with me that the residents deserve your very best. Is there something I can do to help you improve your attitude? My point is creating an opportunity for people to be successful as opposed to creating opportunities where they feel like they may be failing. So I encourage you to keep these things in mind when you're interacting with your fellow nursing assistants. And I encourage you to think about this. If you approach their conversations from this perspective each time you engage, you're going to have a higher degree of success. And because you're focusing on the performance and not the person, you're going to be less likely to offend them. And you're going to be reinforcing the importance of your profession and your ethics and your conduct. So to conclude for today, I'd like to ask you to think about this quote. We all need people who will give us feedback. That's how we improve. I encourage you to provide your fellow nursing assistants with the best feedback you possibly can so that they are the best caregiver they can be, so that we can meet or exceed the expectations of the people we care for on a daily basis. I look forward to talking with you during the next episode.